My beloved child, listen carefully, because something important has finally ended, and the silence around you is not empty anymore. It carries the sound of a chapter closing in a way you did not expect. For a long time, you have felt as if you were standing in the same place while everything around you kept moving, wondering why certain answers delayed, why certain doors stayed closed, why certain moments felt unfinished. But now the weight that stayed around your heart is beginning to loosen, and even if you cannot fully explain it yet, something deep within you already knows that a line has been crossed and nothing will return to the way it was before. There were nights when you questioned whether the waiting had meaning. There were mornings when you looked ahead and saw no clear sign, only distance, only uncertainty, only the same questions repeating in your thoughts. Yet while you believed nothing was changing, many unseen things were slowly reaching their final moment. Quiet endings do not always announce themselves with noise. Sometimes they arrive softly, like a hidden key turning inside a locked place, and suddenly what held you for so long no longer has power over you. Do not skip, because what is unfolding now is connected to everything that once made you wonder if your efforts were invisible. There were conversations you never heard, decisions made far from your sight, and moments when what seemed delayed was actually being arranged with exact timing. Something huge is waiting for you, and the reason this moment feels unusual is because what has ended is not small. It is something that once occupied your thoughts, your emotions, and your patience. A season of carrying what was never meant to remain forever has reached its edge. That burden that felt permanent was not designed to stay. The confusion that kept circling your mind is losing its voice. The repeated heaviness that returned even when you tried to move forward is reaching a point where it can no longer lead your days. Stay till the end, because what follows after an ending often arrives quietly before people recognize its value. You may notice that certain things around you feel different even before visible proof appears. A sentence spoken by someone may sound ordinary, yet inside it you will sense that something has shifted. A moment that looks simple may suddenly carry unusual meaning. What once looked closed may begin to open without struggle. This is because endings create space, and that space is already preparing for something you have not fully seen yet. For some time, you have looked back more than you wanted to. Certain memories tried to keep returning. Certain unfinished thoughts tried to remain important. But now even those old echoes are weakening, because what had authority in yesterday cannot control what is beginning now. The reason you feel this pull to listen closely is because your spirit recognizes change before your eyes can explain it. Do not skip this moment. There are people who thought your story would remain exactly where it was. There were voices that assumed your direction would never change. Yet endings often happen before anyone notices them, and by the time others understand, the next page has already begun. Something huge is waiting for you, not because everything becomes easy at once, but because what once blocked movement has reached its final sentence. There is a reason certain disappointments no longer hurt the same way. There is a reason certain names no longer hold the same weight. There is a reason certain delays now feel less powerful than before. It is because what once stood strongly in front of you is no longer standing in the same place. The ending has already started, even if you are only now beginning to recognize it. Stay till the end, because there is more behind this than you realize. Sometimes an ending arrives before a message, before a sign, before confirmation. It begins in silence and only later becomes visible. What matters now is that you do not mistake silence for emptiness. Silence can be the strongest signal that movement has already begun where your eyes cannot yet reach. You are not standing where you stood before. Even if the room looks the same, even if the people around you sound the same, even if the day appears ordinary, something within your journey has changed. A long pause has touched its limit. A chapter that resisted closure has now reached it. And once something important truly ends, the next thing approaches faster than expected. Do not step away now, because the next part carries something even deeper. Something you thought would remain unfinished is closer to clarity than you imagine, and what follows this ending may explain why the delay lasted as long as it did. But here is what makes this moment extraordinary: the ending you have been sensing is connected to something that quietly lost its hold long before today, even though you were still feeling its shadow. Many times you believed you were still surrounded by the same limits, yet what had power over your peace was already weakening behind the scenes. That is why your thoughts have recently felt different, why certain worries no longer stay as long, and why a strange calm appears even when nothing visible has changed yet. Do not skip, because this part matters more than it first appears. Some endings do not arrive with announcement. They arrive with realization. A sudden understanding. A quiet awareness that what once controlled your emotions can no longer command the same attention. What once felt impossible to release has already started fading, and now you are standing at the point where even your own heart begins to notice that something important has truly ended. There were moments when you almost gave up expecting clarity. You looked at unfinished situations and wondered whether they would remain unresolved forever. Yet even while you were questioning, unseen movement continued. Certain delays were not permanent. Certain silences were not empty. They were holding a transition that had not yet reached the surface. Something huge is waiting for you, and that is why this ending feels deeper than ordinary change. Stay till the end, because there is a reason certain memories suddenly return before disappearing again. Often, before a chapter fully closes, it gives one final echo, one last reminder, one final reflection so you can understand how far you have already come. What once kept your attention every day now appears weaker, smaller, less powerful than before. That is not accidental. It is proof that the hold is breaking. You may soon notice that what once felt urgent now feels distant. A message may come, a moment may appear, a simple event may happen, and suddenly you will understand why everything had to move slowly until now. The closing of one season often happens quietly so that the next arrival can enter without confusion. And right now, that quiet closing is already happening around you. Do not skip. Listen carefully. There were times when you thought nothing would ever shift because the outside looked unchanged. Yet hidden changes often happen first in silence. A locked feeling begins to loosen. A heavy thought begins to lose strength. A repeated question begins to matter less. These are signs that what stayed too long has reached its final place. Something huge is waiting for you, because endings create room that cannot stay empty for long. What leaves behind space also prepares that space for something else to enter. This is why your attention must remain steady now. What comes after this is not random. It connects directly to the title written over this moment. Something important has finally ended, and because it has ended, something unexpected is now free to move closer. There are people who still think your story remains exactly where they last imagined it. They do not know how much has shifted inside you. They do not see how quietly your direction has changed. But soon even what is hidden will begin to show itself through simple moments, through words, through decisions, through sudden clarity that arrives without warning. Stay till the end, because not every ending is loss. Some endings are release. Some endings are answers. Some endings are the reason new peace enters. What you once feared would stay unresolved forever is no longer standing with the same strength. The chapter is closing more completely than you realize. And when you look back later, you may discover that this exact moment was the turning point, the place where what had been repeating for too long finally stopped repeating. The place where silence changed meaning. The place where you first understood that what seemed delayed was actually being completed in perfect timing. Do not skip the next part, because what follows may explain why this ending happened now and why the next moment could arrive sooner than expected. Now listen even more closely, because the reason this ending feels so powerful is that it was connected to something that kept asking for your attention long after its season had already passed. You carried thoughts that were meant to teach you, but not stay with you forever. You held questions that once felt necessary, yet now even those questions are beginning to lose their weight. This is how important endings often happen. First the heart notices a quiet release, then the mind slowly understands that what once felt permanent has already moved behind you. Do not skip, because this is the point where many people miss what is truly happening. They look for loud signs, but some of the strongest moments arrive in silence. A quiet day can hold a turning point. An ordinary hour can contain the final closing of something that influenced many months of your life. That is why this moment matters more than it appears. Something huge is waiting for you, and the ending itself is preparing the way for that arrival. You may have recently felt a strange distance from things that once affected you deeply. A thought appears, but it does not stay long. A memory returns, but it no longer controls your mood. A situation that once created tension now feels strangely quiet. These are not small details. These are signals that what once stood strongly before you has lost its place. Stay till the end, because what comes after an ending often arrives faster than expected. There are moments when everything seems unchanged until one single detail suddenly makes the difference clear. A sentence, a call, a decision, an encounter, or even a brief moment of realization can reveal that the chapter is no longer open. What you thought was still waiting may already be complete. There were days when you looked ahead and saw only uncertainty, and that uncertainty tried to convince you that nothing meaningful was moving. But hidden progress often happens where eyes cannot measure it. While you were wondering, timing was still unfolding. While you were waiting, certain things were reaching their final point without your awareness. Do not skip this part, because the truth is deeper than it first sounds. Some things had to end quietly so that you would not be distracted when the next thing begins. Loud endings often pull attention backward, but quiet endings allow new movement to enter without confusion. This is why the silence around you now feels unusual. It is not empty silence. It is the sound of something old losing its final hold. Something huge is waiting for you, and one reason you can sense it is because your spirit often notices change before visible proof arrives. You may feel that certain expectations no longer fit the way they once did. Certain fears no longer sound convincing. Certain delays no longer feel endless. This is because the inner shift has already started, and outer clarity often follows after that. Stay till the end, because many people do not realize that endings also reveal strength. You survived moments you once thought would stay unresolved forever. You continued when answers did not come quickly. You moved forward even when the path looked unfinished. And now the very thing that once seemed unfinished is reaching a point where it no longer defines your direction. The chapter that held your attention for so long is no longer writing the same sentence. The repetition is breaking. The old emotional weight is becoming lighter. The silence that once felt uncertain is becoming meaningful. What has finally ended is not only a season, it is the influence that season had over your peace. Do not skip, because the next part carries the deeper reveal, why this ending happened now, why the timing feels unusual, and why the next moment may hold something you did not expect to arrive so soon. And now the deeper truth begins to appear. This ending happened exactly when your heart became ready to recognize that not everything unfinished is meant to remain open forever. Some chapters close only after you have learned how to stand without depending on constant signs. What you once kept revisiting in your thoughts has now reached a quiet conclusion, and even if no loud announcement has arrived, something inside you already understands that the weight is no longer the same. Do not skip, because this is where many fail to notice the greatest shift. They expect dramatic proof, yet often the strongest turning point arrives through calm. A peaceful moment suddenly feels different. A familiar day carries a new kind of stillness. A thought that once returned every hour suddenly loses its urgency. This is not accidental. This is the sound of something important finally ending in a way that leaves space for something stronger. For a long time, certain emotions kept returning like unfinished echoes. You tried to move forward, yet part of your attention remained tied to what had not yet fully closed. But now those echoes are fading. Their voice is weaker. Their influence is smaller. What once asked for your energy every day is no longer standing in the center of your thoughts. Something huge is waiting for you, because once an old hold breaks, new movement becomes possible. Stay till the end, because what follows an ending often surprises those who waited the longest. There are moments when life changes quietly, and only later do you realize that one small shift opened many doors at once. A sentence you hear soon may sound ordinary to others but meaningful to you. A simple moment may suddenly explain why everything had to slow down before now. You may wonder why this closing did not happen earlier. The answer is simple. Some endings require inner readiness before outer confirmation arrives. If it had happened before now, you may not have recognized its value. But now you are able to see more clearly, think more calmly, and understand more deeply than before. That is why the timing matters. Do not skip this moment, because there are still hidden details connected to this chapter. What looked delayed was not forgotten. What looked silent was not empty. What looked still was not without movement. Behind what appeared ordinary, many small things were reaching their final place. And now, because they have reached that point, the path ahead no longer carries the same resistance. Something huge is waiting for you, not because everything changes in one instant, but because one finished chapter changes how the next chapter begins. The old pressure no longer speaks with the same strength. The repeated uncertainty no longer leads every thought. The heaviness that once felt constant is beginning to lose its shape. Stay till the end, because there is a reason your attention has been drawn here today. This message meets you at a point where inner clarity is becoming stronger than old confusion. You are not standing in the same emotional place where you once stood. Even if your surroundings look similar, your direction has quietly changed. And when the next sign appears, you may suddenly realize that the ending had already happened before the sign arrived. The sign only confirms what your heart had already started to sense. That is why this moment matters so deeply. It is not only about what ended, but about what no longer has permission to follow you into what comes next. Do not skip the next part, because the final movement of this message carries the strongest reveal of all, why this ending is connected to something approaching that may feel unexpected, personal, and impossible to ignore. And here is the final moment you needed to hear: when something important truly ends, it does not leave emptiness behind. It leaves space for a different kind of beginning, one that often arrives so quietly that only those paying close attention recognize it first. What has been closing around you is not only a chapter, but a long pattern that once seemed impossible to escape. That repeated cycle, that old emotional pull, that constant return to the same unanswered place, it is losing its final influence. Do not skip, because this final part carries what many people wait too long to understand. Sometimes the greatest proof that something has ended is not what disappears outside you, but what no longer rises inside you with the same force. You notice that certain thoughts no longer control your day. You notice that certain memories arrive without the same weight. You notice that even silence feels different now, less uncertain, more steady, more meaningful. Something huge is waiting for you, because endings prepare direction. What has finally ended was standing in front of clarity for longer than you realized. It occupied space that now belongs to something else. That is why this moment feels deeper than ordinary change. You are not simply leaving something behind, you are stepping into a place where your attention is no longer tied to what could not continue forever. Stay till the end, because many people do not recognize how powerful a quiet ending can be. A loud event may capture attention, but a silent completion changes life more deeply. The old tension that once returned again and again is no longer writing the same story. The pause that once felt endless is no longer empty. The waiting that once felt heavy has reached a point where meaning begins to appear. There may soon come a moment that looks simple to everyone else but feels unforgettable to you. A word, a realization, a sudden calm, a new thought that arrives without struggle. These things often confirm that the old chapter is fully closed. And when that confirmation comes, you may realize that what seemed delayed was actually arriving with exact timing. Do not skip this final message, because what ended had to end before what is next could come close. Certain things cannot enter while old weight still fills the space. Certain answers do not arrive while attention remains tied to what has already finished. That is why this ending matters so much now. It has created room for movement you could not have received before. Something huge is waiting for you, and the strongest sign is this: your inner world is becoming quieter in a way that does not feel empty but prepared. The noise is lowering. The pressure is fading. The old urgency is no longer leading your thoughts. That calm is not ordinary, it is often the first signal that a meaningful shift has already begun. Stay till the end of this feeling, because what comes next may not arrive with warning. It may appear in an ordinary hour, during a normal day, in a way that seems small at first but becomes unforgettable later. And when it happens, you will understand why this title belongs to your story right now. Something important has finally ended, and because it ended, what comes next can no longer be delayed. So move forward without holding what no longer belongs to this moment. Let the quiet speak. Let the finished chapter remain finished. Let the closed door stay closed without fear. Because the strongest truth now is simple: what has ended was necessary to end, and what approaches next carries a new kind of meaning that only this ending could prepare you to receive.